Hey there, this is Natalie, and I want to open with a question. Do the Crunchyroll Awards matter? Well, the short answer is no, but the longer answer is no. Accolades from a Western company that isn't really known for being beloved by anime consumers anyway can't really be seen as anything the Japanese industry professionals would be all that proud or excited to win. So they're not worth anything much in terms of giving recognition to the people involved in creating the entertainment we enjoyed over the past 12 months, which would typically be one of the purposes an awards ceremony might have. Equally, with their weird system of awards being decided by a mixture of subscriber votes and a panel of judges, the Crunchyroll Awards can't even be seen as a barometer of what fans actually liked best either. The whole thing is pretty meaningless, and really we've all just come to see it as the annual embarrassing display of Crunchyroll's general corporate tone deafness. Even so, because the judges, or as I prefer to call them, the Council of Literally Who, and the people who could be bothered to vote on Crunchyroll, have now informed us which anime was indeed the safest choice, best of 2021, I think it's a good opportunity to look back at what was one of the best years in anime in recent memory, and perhaps argue a little with the conclusion that the best things to come out of it were half a season of a show that started in 2013 and the Demon Slayer movie. Now, I will say that, unlike in some previous years, there's nothing completely ridiculous and baffling about the award choices, but it all just smacks of playing it safe, with mainstream crowd pleasers on the prestigious awards and throwing out some token crumbs to less popular shows that were critically acclaimed, as long as there was nothing remotely controversial about them. This is why you see things like Vivy, Odd Taxi and To Your Eternity nominated for quite a few things. To show that Crunchyroll was aware of some of the stuff that aired that didn't make any headlines for making all of the money in the world, but you knew there was no chance of them actually winning if they were up against the Demon Slayer movie, which, call me crazy, but to my mind should only really have been eligible in the Best Movie category. Have some restraint, Crunchyroll. If you want the easy option of just picking Demon Slayer for everything, can you not just wait until next year's awards, now there's an actual season of it out? Were you worried the hype around what is essentially a mid-tier basic shonen story with nice animation would die down if you didn't lavish it with enough praise, and it might stop making all of the money in the world? Come on, the only thing that movie really did was give us another statistic to prove how badly Western comics are being slaughtered by manga properties in the West. And as fun as that always is, your Crunchyroll, winning over Western normies to the wonders of the animes, is a business goal for you. And so jerking off over the popularity of Demon Slayer is pretty corporate and unsightly when you do it. Besides, it's not even like they needed it to make up the numbers, due to a lack of other deserving shows in any of the categories it won. It really just made for a more boring and anticlimactic win in most cases. But let's go through the awards, nominees, and eventual winners. The categories themselves are pretty basic. There isn't even an award for something like Best Script or Best Actual Story, so there aren't too many to go through, but we'll begin with the big one, Best Anime. Now, the winner here was Attack on Titan Season 4 Part 1, and I'm kind of conflicted about this, because while I do really like Attack on Titan, here we're talking about the full package, I presume, so this needs to be the overall best anime of the year, in a year which, as I said before, was packed with quality shows, especially during the first two seasons. And I would say Attack on Titan Season 4 Part 1 wasn't actually the best season of Attack on Titan. That's not just my opinion, but probably would be the opinion of most fans once the recency bias has worn off. The move from Studio Wit to Mappa and the use of CG was heavily criticised. Personally, I didn't mind how it looked, but you can't really ignore that it wasn't as good as previous seasons visually, or in terms of things like soundtrack. This was all for completely valid reasons, I would say, But that isn't really relevant to the point when it comes to awards for the finished products we actually got. It was also only the first core of a season, so didn't really offer a complete and satisfying experience on its own, as you shouldn't really expect it to. I thought it was great, don't get me wrong, but if it wasn't the best season of Attack on Titan, and yet was the best season of anime in the whole of 2021, well, that doesn't really speak very highly of the quality of the year in general. Was there really nothing that could beat maybe the third best season of something that's been coming out for nearly a decade? Looking at the nominations people could actually vote for Best Anime, there were a few things very conspicuous by their absence. Personally, I would have been torn between voting for Jujutsu Kaisen and Odd Taxi. Odd Taxi for being an exceptionally well-written and innovative anime original show that told a complete and compelling story in just one season, and Jujutsu Kaisen for just being all-round well-executed, hype, and extremely entertaining. Of the other nominees, I liked 86, but I wouldn't say it was as flawless as those other two shows. I haven't seen Ranking of Kings yet, but I hear nothing but good things about it, so I'm going to assume it deserves to be there. And the same is true of Sunny Boy. But I'm sure if you watch my channel, you know what I'm going to say next. Where are Mushoku Tensei and Re:Zero? They're not completely forgotten in the awards, by the way. Re:Zero gets a frankly weird nomination for Echidna as Best Antagonist, and we'll come to that. And Mushoku Tensei was nominated for Best Animation and Best Fantasy, which of course it didn't win. So it's not like they just forgot Re:Zero was last year, or wanted to pretend Mushoku Tensei didn't exist because, I don't know, they don't want to piss off r/anime circle jerk who think Mushoku Tensei is proof that every day we weeaboos stray further from God, or something like that. Interestingly, Vivi, co-written by the author of Re:Zero, Tappei Nagatsuki, got quite a few nominations, though it didn't win anything. And that's great because Vivi was awesome and deserves to be seen by more people. But if you compare the two works, Re:Zero is by far the more popular and acclaimed one, even among people who endlessly simp for Tappei Nagatsuki like me. Now, with Re:Zero, I can almost see it not making sense as a nomination for Anime of the Year. It was the delayed second half of Season 2, a season that should originally have been aired all at once the year before, and on its own, as just half of the second season, perhaps the same arguments I made against Attack on Titan Season 4 Part 1 actually apply here too. It was only half of an arc that really should be judged in its entirety. The production quality wasn't quite as good as the first season, and fans of the source material weren't convinced by every aspect of it. But Mushoku Tensei. That was a new, highly anticipated show. It had incredible animation that even the people who absolutely hated it had to admit made them wish they didn't. It was an adaptation fans of the source material were by and large very satisfied with, at least that's the impression I got. And it got a lot of people thinking more seriously about what the potential of the isekai genre is when it's done well. Now, I'm a big fan of Mushoku Tensei, I make a lot of content about it, I've read all the source material, and so on, so of course I'm biased. But if you look at literally any best anime of 2021 list, except for Crunchyroll's, Mushoku Tensei is either high up in there, normally at number 1, or it's ignored completely because of its controversial elements. Crunchyroll admit it exists in their award nominations, but don't consider it a contender for Anime of the Year. It's easy to say this is because they don't want to upset the people who hate it, but let's face it, there are insane people who think Attack on Titan endorses fascism, and they would have pissed them off by having that eligible to win. So, I think the main reason why many critics' Anime of the Year was not nominated was Crunchyroll didn't license it. And you know that if it won, it would have been a lot of fun to point out that they didn't have their own best anime of the year on their platform. Something something High Guardian Spice, yada yada. Still, let's move on to the next category, Best Animation. This is one where Mushoku Tensei was a nominee, though actually, of the shows listed, I'd probably have picked Dragon Maid S as the winner. Because for the type of show it is, it genuinely didn't even need to be as beautifully animated as it was, and it really felt like KyoAni coming back with a huge flex of what they could do. Vivy is another show that had exceptional animation by Studio Wit, and Jujutsu Kaisen also fully deserves this nomination. I haven't actually seen the other nominee, Wonder Egg Priority, yet. There was a lot of good stuff on that season, and I just never got around to it. The concept looking sort of sad girls doing weird things, which really you have to be in the right sort of mood for. But if I remember correctly, Wonder Egg Priority was a production that had some serious issues in terms of the pressure being put on its staff. I seem to remember episodes being delayed by a few hours on some occasions because they hadn't finished making them, and reports of the stress getting dangerously intense for the people working on it. So I think, well, even if the animation was good enough to rival things like Mushoku Tensei and Jujutsu Kaisen, it probably wasn't worth that cost. And that sort of thing shouldn't really be encouraged. Not that any of it matters because Demon Slayer Mugen Train won. And next up we have Best OP Sequence. For once, this is one I can't really bitch that Mushoku Tensei or ReZero didn't win. This went to Attack on Titan for Boku no Senso. Weird, I always thought it was called My War in English, what with the entire song being in English and saying My War quite a lot. But apparently not. I think that song slaps, and the OP sequence itself was quite inventive in the way it managed to give the right feel while avoiding spoilers, unlike the new one, which is basically the plot of the arc explained through the medium of shouting in a really metal voice, though which I also actually think slaps. This is probably one where I would agree with the choice, but only because the Jujutsu Kaisen OP nominated was the Core 2 one, and not Kai Kai Kitan. Other nominations were Beastars, Dragon Maid S, Tokyo Revengers and Odd Taxi, all of which were good, though I think Odd Taxi deserves extra points for the fact that the OP sequence actually reveals two of the big twists in the show in a really clever, hidden in plain sight kind of way. If you haven't noticed it, go back and watch the OP again, and you'll get it straight away if you've seen the whole series. Best Ending went to the Demon Slayer movie, which was nominated in this category alongside Beastars, Attack on Titan, and first appearances in the nominations for Shadow's House, Skate the Infinity, and So I'm a Spider, So What. The ending song I like the most of these is Attack on Titans, but I think So I'm a Spider deserves some credit for doing something really interesting and fun with the ending sequence, really leveraging the voice acting, so I might have been persuaded to vote for that. Personally though, of things that weren't nominated, I liked the second ED from Make You Black Company with the weird dance best, but I might be alone in that. Next up we have Best Boy. And, well, it really looks like they didn't want to turn this into a husbando thing, because the winner is this Ghibli-looking baby from Ranking of Kings. I can't really comment on the goodness of the boy, because, as I said, I haven't watched it yet, but it will take a lot to convince me he's a better Best Boy than Subaru. Subaru isn't nominated, however, and the choices for this one feel quite random, to be honest. There's Odakawa from Odd Taxi, who I think a lot of people would have seen as a reasonable winner, though I think he's a better fit for the Best Protagonist category, which he actually did win. Then there's Senku in the first and only appearance from Dr. Stone in the nominations, Izumi Miyamura from Horimiya, and both Mikey and Draken from Tokyo Revengers. I would have expected to see Itadori Yuji in here, to be honest, maybe Senpai from Nagatoro, and I'd have thought Skate the Infinity would have popped up a bit here too. I haven't watched it, but I got the impression it was a very husbando-y kind of show. Maybe someone from Fruits Basket? I don't know. I feel like they kind of weren't so coherent about what they wanted the Best Boy category to actually be, where it's a mix between husbando-type Best Boys and characters like Odakawa and Boji, who seem more like Best Protagonist type options, and there's already another category for that. If it's supposed to be Best Male Character overall, then surely there were way too many characters deserving of consideration to really afford having two from the same show in the 6 final nominations. I don't know, it just seems really arbitrary. Still, they exercised enough restraint to not nominate Tanjiro, so I suppose we can at least say this was one of the more interesting categories. Best Girl went to Nobara from Jujutsu Kaisen, and this is a solid choice I think most people wouldn't have a problem with. Other nominations were Lena from 86, another popular character for good reason, Komi, Toru, the Fruits Basket one, not the Dragon Maid one, though either would have been a decent pick, and then two from shows I didn't watch, in Sarasa Watanabe from Kageki Shoujo and Ai Oto from Wonder Egg Priority. I don't know about the last two, and the other four I think are all good, so my only real complaint here is, okay, but I would have picked a totally different set of nominations, and all of my real favourites are missing. And that's going to be a complaint most people would be able to make, because as I said way back in my spring 2021 season Top Waifus video, there were some really good Best Girl candidates last year. Really, I'd say the only honest complaint I have, that isn't just it not being the exact same list I'd have made, is that it would have been good to see Emilia from Re:Zero on here, to kind of acknowledge that as a character who was kind of maligned for not getting much development in Season 1, in the second core of Season 2, she really became a main character of the show, and a lot of the reasons why we should care about her as a character were finally revealed. I feel like she won over a lot of people, and she was the focus of the core of Re:Zero that came out in 2021, so I just think in terms of best girls as likeable, well-written female characters, she became a solid example last year. Also, I still would have picked Nagatoro even if Emilia was on the list, but that's just me and my weird love for Nagatoro. Best score went to the Demon Slayer movie. Probably because, it's a movie and cinematic releases tend to go all in on that element. Though of the nominees, I'd have given this one to Vivi 100%, because music was an integral part of the actual story of Vivi, and the soundtrack really made that element work. I think a similar argument could be made for something like Those Snow White Notes, but that wasn't nominated. Best Director went to Baku Shinoshita for Odd Taxi, and I would agree with that hands down. The final episode of Odd Taxi was one of the best things I saw last year, and I love how that series was a unique one-shot vision that wasn't trying to launch some long-running franchise or jump on a popular genre. It was extremely tight with the writing and direction, and basically it can't be praised enough as a standalone anime experience. And actually, I think Odd Taxi should also have won the next category, which it was also nominated for, which was Best Character Designer. This went to Tadashi Hiramatsu for Jujutsu Kaisen, which is deserved. I mean, Jujutsu Kaisen has some really interesting character designs, which have already become iconic. But the reason I'd have given this to Odd Taxi again is that, well, without spoiling anything, the team of director Baku Shinoshita and Hiromi Nakayama, who handled Odd Taxi's character design, didn't just have to make one design that worked for each character in the very large cast, but two. And I think they pulled this off in a way that supported the story effortlessly. They were also dealing with an anime original property, where nobody had any expectations for what the characters would look like or be like, so they had to really sell the show on these designs, and how well they put across certain aspects of it. Still, Odd Taxi did score a win on the next category, which I already mentioned, and which was Best Protagonist. For this one, he came up against Boji from Ranking of Kings again, as before in the Best Boy category. So I don't really understand the logic in how, while both are boys and both are protagonists, Boji is somehow better at being one and Odakawa at the other. But if we're going to get into weird logic, we'd also have to question how Eren Yeager is nominated in this category and also Best Antagonist. He won Best Antagonist, beating Echidna among others, who wasn't even the antagonist of the arc she was nominated for, that would have been Roswell. And Eren also won despite it not really being clear whether he was an antagonist or not yet in Season 4 Part 1. But whatever, let's just keep moving. Actually no, let's not keep moving. Let's establish that you can't be both the protagonist and the antagonist at the same time. You can be a villain protagonist, but that's not the same thing. Antagonist describes a role in relation to the protagonist, not in relation to the morality of the character, as seen by the rest of the world in the story, or by the audience. So, while a character could be best protagonist and best villain at the same time, they can't be best protagonist and best antagonist at the same time, except perhaps in some very fringe cases, involving characters opposing themselves due to split personalities or whatever. Eren could be seen as the antagonist in Attack on Titan now, but only if you now see the allies opposing him to have become the protagonists. I think what they probably mean by it is he could be considered best protagonist and best villain, just as Echidna could be seen as possibly a villain, even though she isn't really opposing Subaru or Emilia as the arc antagonist in the same way as Roswaal. But they didn't make the distinction between villain and antagonist, perhaps because only weird people like me would ever think about it enough to notice. Okay, weird tangent over. Best fight scene went to Yuji Itadori and Aoi Todo versus Hanami, one of 2 Jujutsu Kaisen scenes nominated, and it beat out a great scene from Vivi, as well as Elma versus Toru from Dragon Maid S, plus the Attack Titan versus Warhammer Titan fight, and something from Boruto. As with other categories where Jujutsu Kaisen won, I think it's a good and deserving choice, but I'll also give the Council of Literally Who some credit here for nominating Vivi and Dragon Maid, which very much deserve recognition for their fight scenes despite not being shonen battle shows. I mean, it's a low bar, but they could have just bulked this one out with whatever arbitrary scenes from My Hero Academia, or just given it to the Demon Slayer movie. Now we get to the genre-specific ones. Best Romance went to Horimiya, beating Nagatoro, Komi, Beastars, Fruits Basket, and the Duke of Death and his maid. I actually couldn't really get into Horimiya and dropped it after a couple of episodes. I wouldn't mind giving it another chance, but that season was full of stuff I was watching, and for some reason I didn't really warm to the lead female character in those first couple of episodes. And I mean, watching a romance where you don't really like one of the 2 leads is kind of boring. But I think I'm very much in the minority for not getting into it, and I can't even particularly say why I didn't, so I still think it's probably a deserving winner. I also can't really think of any romance-focused shows I watched that deserve to be on the list more than the ones that were nominated. I mean, I quite liked I Shaved and Brought Home a High School Runaway, but I would see that more as primarily a drama, and it did have quite a lot of flaws in its writing. And, you know, there was always redo of Healer. Best Drama went to Your Eternity, which is an interesting show. I found it more melancholic and philosophical than dramatic. It was very much a series of stories with a particular mood, rather than an ongoing dramatic narrative, like something like Odd Taxi, 86 or Wonder Egg Priority, which were also nominated, or Vivi, which wasn't in this category. But it's good to see something a bit different win something. Jujutsu Kaisen won Best Action, beating Vivi, SSSS Dynazenon, and no, I'm not sure how to pronounce that at all, and Wonder Egg Priority, but also the Demon Slayer movie and Attack on Titan. So Attack on Titan was the best anime of 2021, but not the best anime in the genre you put it in. Yes, I know that could just be seen as Jujutsu Kaisen was better at being an action show, whereas Attack on Titan was better overall. But it could also mean the whole grand enterprise is just a case of dishing out the right amount of bones to the right parts of the anime community to try to pander to everyone just the right amount. One for you, Jujutsu Kaisen, one for you, Attack on Titan, one for you, Demon Slayer, and one for all the people who watch something other than shonen. Rinse and repeat. I mean, the genre things are in are a bit weird here anyway, where, especially with action, a lot of things will normally straddle another genre too. So Vivy is action sci-fi, though there isn't a sci-fi category for some reason, so that doesn't matter. Nagatoro and Komi are rom-coms, so both romance and comedy. And your Attack on Titan, Demon Slayer, and Jujutsu Kaisens are action and fantasy. Now, most of the time when something straddles two genres like that, in this set of awards, it will be nominated in both. We do indeed see Komi and Nagatoro again in the comedy category. Odd Taxi appears in both comedy and drama, To Your Eternity is drama and fantasy, and so on. But for some reason, things like Demon Slayer and Attack on Titan have been left out of the fantasy category, I guess to give all the other poor shows a chance. And so we come to the best fantasy category, and I know people are probably expecting me to be super salty that time I got reincarnated as a slime one and Mushoku Tensei didn't. And yeah, I do think it's a pretty weird choice. I would rate Slime about a B tier on an isekai tier list. I mean, it's fairly entertaining and it has some good characters, but the pacing is all over the place. And that weird lurch in tone into genocide in season 2 felt really unearned, and to me made it seem even more like Overlord with all the finesse and interesting world building and conflict sucked out than it already did. And I'd rate Mushoku Tensei as an S tier on that same isekai tier list, along with Re:Zero, which wasn't even nominated in this category. I'd also rate several other fantasy or isekai shows from the last year as better than season 2 of Slime, which weren't nominated either. Yet it is a popular isekai series, and it's the only isekai series that won anything, so in a weird way, I'm almost happy to see it there, breaking up the monotony, despite the fact I think it's kind of mid. Other nominations were Wonder Egg Priority, To Your Eternity, Ranking of Kings, and the case study of Vanitas, and I haven't seen most of those. Vanitas is another one I hear a lot of good things about, but I just kind of hate vampires if they're not called Dio Brando, so every time I go to start it, I end up being lured in by something else instead. I would say, based on what I've heard about the merits of the ones of these I haven't watched, that from a writing, or fantasy-focused perspective, they probably all deserve to be on the list, and are probably all things I'd personally think were more interesting at least than Slime, though possibly not more fun. But, well, it's obvious from what I've said so far, and from my channel in general, that I would give the 2021 Best Fantasy Award to Mushoku Tensei. Comedy is the next category, and here Komi wins, with the other nominations being Nagatoro, Dragon Maid S, Heaven's Design Team, Life Lessons with Uramichi Onisan, and Odd Taxi again. Now, as much as I love Odd Taxi, I don't really think it belongs here. It is funny, it has very funny dialogue, but something having jokes in it doesn't make it primarily a comedy. Odd Taxi gets likened to a Tarantino movie for its writing, and I think it would be a fair comparison to say that it appearing with a Best Comedy nomination because the characters themselves are people who say witty things, so the dialogue ends up being humorous, would be like lumping Pulp Fiction in with like Zoolander or something that's built around comedy. I'd also say that while I liked Komi a lot, it was more for the wholesome, cute feel it had than because it was consistently laugh out loud funny, whereas Nagatoro and Dragon Maid S were, to me at least, genuinely hilarious in just about every scene, so I probably wouldn't have picked Komi as the best comedy, despite enjoying it a lot. It probably is the safer pick of the three though, given Nagatoro and Dragon Maid both had higher levels of tedious social media backlash. Heaven's Design Team I thought was pretty mediocre, and I would probably have forgotten it existed while making the nominations, and given its spot to Combatants Will Be Dispatched, Tsukimichi, Suppose a Kid from the Last Dungeon Boonies Moved to a Starter Town, or I've Been Killing Slimes for 300 Years, probably because I'm isekai trash. But yeah, this list was pretty much fine. Next we have Best Movie, and I don't feel like I need to tell you what won that. I I can't really say much about this category because I don't really watch movies unless they're a continuation of a series I'm watching, so I'd have no idea whether I'd pick Demon Slayer or something else here. But let me know in the comments if you're more knowledgeable on this category, what you think should have won. But the next category, I would say, without hyperbole, was an absolute travesty. It is Best Japanese VA Performance. And the thing that's so shocking is not that it went to Yuki Kaji for Eren Yeager. That was a solid performance. It was that it didn't go to Aoi Yuki for Kumoko in So I'm a Spider, So What, even though she was nominated. If you haven't seen So I'm a Spider, this had to be the most demanding role of the year. Kumoko is a character who spends the majority of the season on her own, basically monologuing, as well as having to have conversations between different personalities of herself that she uses a skill to give autonomy to. Her hyperactive, dramatic, and funny personality basically has to carry a lot of the scenes of the show, explain a lot of the complicated mechanics of the world she's in a way that still sounds entertaining and in character, and requires a level of energy that not a lot of people could pull off, while still coming across as entertaining and likeable rather than annoying. She also performs the hectic ending song, which was nominated in the Best ED category in its own right. Now, So I'm a Spider was a show where the production quality in a lot of places left a lot to be desired. Whether it was because of the pandemic or whether it was a budgetary thing and it would have looked like it did anyway, I don't know. But there were some monsters in that show that made Overlord Season 3 look stunning. It managed to be quite good in spite of this for two reasons. One being the fact that it's an interesting story, but of course it's based on light novels, so if the adaptation looked like arse, one could easily say just to read those instead. But the other was the sheer talent and effort put in by Aoi Yuki in playing Kumoko, bringing a character to life who, due to hardly ever getting to have conversations with anybody, was quite a difficult one to translate from novel to anime form. I thought when I saw the nominations that this one was a given. It was easily the most demanding role of those nominated, and it was pulled off extremely successfully. So I was surprised to see Eren's VA win it in the end, but it is what it is. I'd also like to say that if I had to give this to someone from the cast of Attack on Titan, I would have gone with the other VA who was nominated from the show, which was Ayane Sakura, who played Gabby. This is because, well, I can't stand Gabby. Like, even before she killed Sasha, even after she gets something of a redemption and stops being so racist, her personality always annoyed me in the manga. But in the anime adaptation, I found myself seeing the less annoying side of her, and hating her just a tiny bit less. I've talked about this with a few other people who've agreed that there was something in Ayane Sakura's performance that did make Gabby feel more sympathetic and compelling than we perceived her from the manga, and given she's a character whose development is something we're supposed to be quite invested in, I'd say that was a big achievement. And that's really the end of the categories I can have an opinion on, because the rest are for voice actors in different languages, and I only watch subs, so I have no idea who any of the English language VAs are or what their performances were like, let alone the ones in other languages. If you're a dub watcher in any of the languages they had awards for, let me know your thoughts on the nominees and winners in the comments. So, that's another year's Crunchyroll Anime Awards out of the way. I hope you at least enjoyed looking back at some of the great anime from the last year, even if the awards themselves were as bland as ever. Let me know your thoughts down below, and as always, thanks to my supporters on Patreon, thank you to everyone who helps me out by subscribing and watching my videos, and thank you for watching this one. I hope to see you again very soon.